Hi guys, welcome to video number 2 in our studying of the Odyssey. So we're going to pick up where we left off on the reading, and let me just remind you, this time I've got some fancy pictures and graphics to go, but let me just remind you that as you're going you should be pausing to take notes, perhaps pausing to re-listen or reread certain parts. Remember, we will usually have an open note quiz the next day after a reading assignment, so it's important that you watch these videos, you're engaged with them, you take the notes so that when you come to class the next day you're ready to take that open note quiz and get into the activities I have planned. Okay, so before we start reading, let's remind ourselves where we are in the Odyssey. Here's a map. Let me get this a little bigger on my screen here. This is a map of the Odyssey. So I think you can see that whole thing. Kinda, there we go. Okay, so the Odyssey begins with Odysseus in Troy, where they fought the war. So that's right here at number 1. Then he goes up to this little island and faces some horsemen that are some trouble. He goes all the way down here, then back up here, then here, then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and finally 15 and 16 is Ithaca. Now look, if he could have taken a straight path from Troy back to Ithaca, this wouldn't have taken him 10 years to get home. But because of his various adventures, which we'll get into, he goes on a very roundabout path. Now, if you remember from the first video, when Homer was invoking the muse to help him tell the story, he said that he wanted to begin when pretty much everybody else had returned home or had died. So when we are picking up now in this video with Odysseus, we're with him here at 14 on CALYPSO's island, okay? So he's already had all of the adventures 2 through 13. We're meeting up with him here at 14, but we do get to hear about those adventures in a little bit, because what happens is when Odysseus gets to the island of Scheria here in 15, he retells all of his other adventures. So that's how we get to hear those in a flashback. But for today, where we are is at number 14. We're joining Odysseus as he is on CALYPSO's island. So let's read a little bit about that. Calypso, the sweet nymph. No words were lost on Hermes the wayfinder, who bent to tie his beautiful sandals on, ambrosial, golden, that carry him over water or over endless land in a swish of the wind, and took the wand with him which he charms asleep, or when he wills awake, the eyes of men. So what this is talking about is Odysseus is on Calypso's island. He's been there for about 7 years. She's been keeping him for herself because she loves him. We heard about that in the first video. But what happens is Athena, who is a big fan of Odysseus, she's one of his alter egos that sort of exhibits his best qualities. She has gone to her father Zeus and she has said, "Dad, you have to tell Calypso to let Odysseus go because he wants to go home." Okay, so Zeus sends Hermes, this guy Hermes with the wings on his helmet and on his sandals. He tells Hermes, the messenger god, he says, "Hermes, I need you to go to Calypso's island. I need you to tell Calypso she's got to let Odysseus go." Okay, so Hermes is a messenger god. He's sent by Zeus at Athena's request, and his job is to tell Calypso she must let Odysseus go. So what we have here in the reading is Hermes getting ready. No words were lost. As soon as Zeus says the word, he was out. He put on his sandals, he got his wand, and he took off to fly to Calypso's island to speak to her and to tell her she needs to let Odysseus go. So wand in hand, he paced into the air, shot from Pieria down to sea level, and veered to skim the swell. A gull patrolling between the wave crests of the desolate sea will dip to catch a fish and douse his wings. No higher above the white caps Hermes flew until the distant island lay ahead. Then rising shoreward from the violet ocean, he stepped up to the cave. So this is a lovely piece of poetry here, in which Homer is describing how Hermes flew to Calypso's island. Okay, he had his wand, he shot from Pieria up and then down to sea level to skim the swell. Swell is another word for the waves of the ocean. So he's just skimming above the water. And then Homer says, a gull patrolling between the wave crests of the desolate sea will dip to catch a fish and douse his wings. So sometimes you might see a gull, a seagull, flying across the ocean. It will dip to catch a fish and will just barely dip its wings into the water like this. And no higher above the whitecaps, Hermes flew. Okay, so what we have here is an epic simile. Sometimes they're called Homeric similes. And remember, that's when the poet compares a really epic event, like a god flying over the ocean, to something that's easily recognizable. So we've all seen a fish dive into the ocean. We've seen that. We know what it looks like. We've never seen a god fly over the ocean. So by comparing this gull to this god, now I have a much clearer image in my head of what Hermes looked like as he skimmed across the ocean there, okay? So here's a little image from an ancient Greek vase. Hermes skipping across the waves there, and just to kind of put that image in your head, there's a gull just dipping to catch a fish, dipping his wings into the water. Okay, remember those epic similes. Right, back from the reading. And then he sees the distant island, he rises shoreward for the violet ocean and steps up to the cave. So now we meet Calypso. All right, and we see Calypso's island here. Divine Calypso, the mistress of the isle, was now at home. Upon her hearthstone a great fire blazing, scented the farthest shores with cedar smoke and smoke of thyme, and singing high and low in her sweet voice before her loom a-weaving, she passed her golden shuttle to and fro. So as Hermes arrives, naked apparently, Calypso is in her cave. She is singing, she's weaving on a loom like this, there's a fire burning, it smells like cedar smoke. We really have a lot of imagery here appealing to the senses. We know what it smells like, we can hear her voice singing, we can see her lovely cave and her weaving. And it continues to describe the ocean, or the island here. A deep wood grew outside with summer leaves of alder and black poplar, pungent cypress. Ornate birds here rested their stretched wings, horned owls, falcons, cormorants, long-tongued beach-combing birds, and followers of the sea. So now we're getting to describe some of the plant life that's on the island, some of the birds that inhabit this island, all kinds of different beautiful creatures and plant life. Around the smooth-walled cave, a crooking vine held purple clusters under ply of green, and 4 springs bubbling up near one another, shallow and clear, took channels here and there through beds of violets and tender parsley. She lives in these beautiful smooth-walled caves that have vines growing up around them with little purple clusters of flowers. Okay, 4 little bubbling springs, so now you can even hear the bubbling water through beds of violets and tender parsley. It's just a gorgeous island, and Homer even points that out here. Even a god who found this place would gaze and feel his heart beat with delight. So Hermes did. Okay, this place was so beautiful and so impressive. It's so gorgeous. It seems like a paradise that even a god would be impressed. And Hermes was impressed. This was a beautiful place. But when he had gazed his fill, so when he'd have enough to see, he entered the wide cave. He goes in to speak to Calypso. Now face to face, the magical Calypso recognized him, as all immortal gods know one another on sight, though seeming strangers far from home. So apparently when one god sees another god, they immediately know each other, even if they've never met before. But he saw nothing of the great Odysseus, who sat apart as 1,000 times before, and racked his own heart groaning with eyes wet, scanning the bare horizon of the sea. But who does Hermes not see in the cave? He does not see Odysseus, because Odysseus, like he always is homesick, and he's sitting apart. Okay, he's sitting away from the cave, away from all this beautiful stuff, on the beach as 1,000 times before, as he does every day, and racked his own heart, groaning with eyes wet, with tears in his eyes, scanning the bare horizon of the sea, looking out into that empty sea and that empty horizon, and probably looking for home. Okay. So there's a little piece taken out here. What happens here is Hermes says, all right, you got to let her go. I mean, you got to let him go. He tells Calypso, Zeus said you have to let Odysseus go. So Calypso can't argue with Zeus. She agrees. Okay, so Hermes leaves. The strong god glittering left her as he spoke. So Hermes takes off. And now her ladyship, having given heed to Zeus's mandate, went to find Odysseus in his stone seat seaward, tear on tear brimming in his eyes. So she goes to find him. She knows she can't say no to Zeus. She finds him where she thinks she's going to find him, here sitting on the beach, crying, homesick. The sweet days of his lifetime were running out in anguish over his exile, for long ago the nymph had ceased to please. Though he fought shy of her and her desire, he lay with her each night, for she compelled him. Okay, so he felt like his life was sort of running out as he was here exiled, kicked out of his homeland. And it says, long ago the nymph, meaning Calypso, he kind of got over her, right? At first, maybe she was kind of fun. At first, she was maybe kind of a comfort. She's a beautiful goddess after all. But he'd kind of gotten over that. The novelty had worn off a while ago. And he tried to play hard to get. He fought shy of her and her desire. But he did go to bed with her each night, for she compelled him. She made him do it. Okay. But when day came, he sat on the rocky shore and broke his own heart groaning, with eyes wet, scanning the bare horizon of the sea. So even though he lay with her each night, in the morning he was back out on the beach again, feeling homesick, wishing for home. Now she stood near him in her beauty, saying, "Oh, forlorn man, be still. Oh, sad guy, would you be quiet? Here you need grieve no more. You need not feel your life consumed here. I have pondered it, and I shall help you go." Okay, this is interesting. She says, sad man, be quiet. You don't have to stay here all sad anymore. You don't need to feel like I'm wasting your life here anymore. I've thought about it. I've pondered it, and I shall help you go. So now Calypso agrees to release him, but she claims that it's her idea. And now tomorrow, you can bet one of the questions on this quiz will be, why do you think she does this? Okay, she's been told to let Odysseus go. She didn't decide to do it on her own. But when she goes to tell Odysseus it's time to go home, she says, you know, I've thought about it, and I decided you can go home now. I want you to take a minute and think about why she might do that. If you want to pause the video and write down your thoughts, it's a good time. Okay, let's go on here. So she says she's going to help him. She promises that she's going to give him provisions. She's going to help him build a raft so that he's got some food and water to get the rest of the way home. But first they're going to go say their goodbyes and have one last dinner together. Swiftly she turned and led him to her cave, and they went in, the mortal and immortal. She took the chair left empty now by Hermes, where the divine Calypso placed before him victuals of drink and men. Then she sat down facing Odysseus, while her serving maids brought nectar and ambrosia to her side. Then each one's hands went out on each one's feast until they had had their pleasure. So they go back to the cave. Hermes gone. He sits in Hermes' chair. She has her servants or whatever bring in people food for him, victuals and drink of men, and she sits down across the table from him, and her serving maids bring her nectar and ambrosia, because that's what goddesses eat. Okay? And then each one's hands went out onto each one's feast. They took some time eating their food until they were full. And then she said, "Son of Laertes, versatile Odysseus, after all these years with me, you still desire your old home? Even so, I wish you well. If you could see it all before you go, all the adversity you face at sea, you would stay here and guard this house and be immortal, though you wanted her forever, that bride for whom you pine each day. Can I be less desirable than she is? Less interesting? Less beautiful? Can mortals compare with goddesses in grace and form?" So as they finish eating, Calypso is basically saying, are you sure you want to go? Are you sure you don't want to stay here with me? If you could see all the dangers you have ahead of you, you might change your mind. In fact, if you agree to stay, I'll make you immortal. You will never die. And then she kind of gets a little proud here, and she asks, why does Odysseus prefer Penelope, that mortal wife, Why does he want it so badly to go back to her when he could have Calypso, an immortal goddess, right? Can I be less desirable than she is? Is she really prettier than me? Is she really more interesting? How can a mortal compare to a goddess? Let's see how Odysseus answers. To this, the strategist Odysseus answered, "My lady goddess, there is no cause for anger. My quiet Penelope, how well I know, would seem a shade before your majesty, death and old age being unknown to you, while she must die. Yet it is true, each day I long for home, long for the sight of home." So he answers very carefully. He says, don't be angry, don't be jealous. He says, my quiet, my humble Penelope, I know very well, would seem just a shadow. Shade is another word for shadow. She would seem like a shadow compared to you and your majesty, because you will never get old and you will never die, and she will. However, it is true, I can't deny it, I want to go home. I long for the sight of home. So he acknowledges Calypso's pride a bit there. He's not too rough. He's not going to insult her. But he does say, but I do want to go home. So what I want you to think about, and again, these are questions I'm going to expect you to be able to talk about in class the next day, is when she asks, why does Odysseus prefer his mortal wife over Calypso, how does he answer her? And what does this show us about Odysseus and his character? What does that reveal about him? I want to pause the video and write that down. Okay, let's continue reading. So what happens here? We're going to skip a bit again, so I'm going to fill you in. So Calypso helps him build a raft, gives him provisions. He sets off into the ocean, but Poseidon does not let him get very far. Poseidon puts the smack down on Odysseus and his little raft, destroys the raft, but Athena helps him. Athena and a sea nymph come to his rescue and drag him on shore to an island called Scheria. Okay, he gets onto the island. He's battered, he's broken, he's practically drowned. He crawls up onto the shore, he climbs into a pile of leaves, and he goes to sleep. And here's what Homer says about that. A man in a distant field, no hearth fires near, will hide a fresh brand in his bed of embers to keep a spark alive for the next day. So in the leaves Odysseus hid himself, while over him Athena showered sleep, that his distress should end, and soon, soon. In quiet sleep she sealed his cherished eyes. Okay, so again, we've got this, somebody's talking here about hearth fires and a fresh brand and a bed of embers, and what we've got is another epic simile. It's another comparison of something huge and heroic compared to something common and everyday. The trouble with this epic simile is this is not really a common everyday thing for us anymore because we're a modern audience. But let me explain what it is. So Odysseus climbs under this pile of leaves, hides himself, and Athena sort of showers sleep on him. And what this part means is when a man is in a distant field, so he's out camping or working in the fields, and he doesn't have his fireplace nearby, he's not home, he will take a burning stick, a fresh brand, and hide it in the bed of embers. So this glowing coals at the bottom, he'll sort of bury that under it, a burning stick. Keep that glowing going to keep a spark alive for the next day, so that in the morning, when it's time to build his morning fire, all he has to do is sort of blow onto those embers and the spark will come alive for the next day. And just in that same way, Odysseus hid in those leaves and slept. So it's like Odysseus is the flame, is the fire. He needs to kind of crawl under and be buried for a little bit, but in the morning we're expecting that spark will sort of come back to a fire again. So that epic simile is a little tough to understand simply because we don't typically need to keep our embers burning and, you know, you flip on the heater. So a little out of date, but still need to understand it. Okay, and so Odysseus falls asleep there. That's it for today's installment. Make sure if you missed anything or if you need to go back and watch again and pause that you do that. Expect an open note quiz. And when we pick up next time, Odysseus gets discovered under his pile of leaves. He gets taken to a nice dinner, and everybody asks him to tell his adventures. So that's when we're going to hear the sort of flashback part as to how Odysseus ended up on Calypso's island in the first place. All right, have a good day.